Late at night, behind a rundown diner, Sarah, a poor but warm-hearted waitress, came across an old man digging through the trash in the freezing snow. Trembling, confused, and unable to remember who he was, feeling for him, she gave him her only meal and brought him back to her cramped apartment. In the days that followed, they cooked together, talked, and slowly began to treat him like family. But everything shifted on a rainy afternoon when Sarah spotted a soaked flyer on the alley wall, with the old man's face printed on it and a single line of text that revealed a secret no one could have imagined. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The back door of Maple Street Diner slammed shut behind Sarah, and the cold hit her like a slap. 11 p.m. Snow drifted down through the broken streetlight, turning everything into shadows and strange shapes. Her feet ached. God, they always ached after the late shift. Sarah hefted the garbage bag over her shoulder, her breath coming out in white puffs. The alley smelled like grease and wet cardboard, and somewhere in the distance, a car alarm was going off. Just another Tuesday night in this part of town. She was halfway to the dumpster when she heard it. A sound, quiet but distinct. The scrape of something against metal. Sarah froze. There, behind the dumpster, a figure hunched over. The man's hands moved through the garbage with desperate, trembling motions. His coat was more holes than fabric, and his white hair caught what little light there was, making him look almost ghostly. Her first instinct was to look away, to pretend she hadn't seen anything. Sarah's hand moved automatically to her coat pocket, feeling the outline of the electric bill notice she'd stuffed there that morning. $347. Past due. The landlord had been calling too, leaving messages she couldn't bring herself to listen to. She should just walk past, dump the trash, and go home to Sophie, to her mother, to the cracked ceiling of their cramped apartment, and the space heater that barely worked, and the stack of bills that never seemed to get smaller, no matter how many double shifts she pulled. The man's shoulders shook. Whether from cold or something else, Sarah couldn't tell. Damn it, she whispered to herself. Her father's voice echoed in her head the way it sometimes did when she was tired. Baby girl, we ain't got much, but we got enough to share. He'd said that the last winter before he died, when he'd given his only warm coat to a stranger at the bus stop. Sarah had been furious with him then. Told him he was being stupid that they needed that coat. A week later, pneumonia took him. The old man shifted and Sarah saw his face. Gaunt, hollowed out, but his eyes, when they caught the light, were clear blue. Lost. Sarah made a decision she'd probably regret. Hey! Her voice came out rougher than she intended. The man's head snapped up. For a second, fear flashed across his face, raw and animal. He stumbled backward, nearly falling. Wait. Sarah held up her free hand. I'm not gonna hurt you. Hold on a second. She dropped the garbage bag and reached into her other coat pocket. The foam container was still warm. Frank, the night cook, had given it to her before she left. A burger and fries, her dinner, the only meal she'd have until tomorrow's lunch break. Sarah looked at the container, then at the old man, then back at the container. Jesus Christ, Sarah, you're such an idiot, she muttered, but she was already walking toward him, holding it out. The man stared at the container like it might explode. His hands shook worse up close, she could see that now. They were raw red with cold, the fingernails cracked and dirty. It's just a burger, Sarah said softly. Take it, please. He reached out slowly, and when his fingers closed around the foam, she saw his whole body sag with relief. He opened it right there, and the way he looked at that burger made Sarah's throat tight. Thank you. His voice was barely a whisper, rough with disuse. Thank you. Sarah nodded, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. She should go. She'd done her good deed. Sophie was probably still awake, waiting up, even though she wasn't supposed to. Her mother would be worried, but the man was eating so carefully, so slowly, like he was trying to make it last, like he couldn't quite believe it was real. What's your name? Sarah heard herself ask. He stopped mid-bite, looked up at her with those confused blue eyes. For a long moment, he just stared, his forehead creasing with effort. He swallowed, set the burger down gently. I'm not sure. Sarah's stomach dropped. You don't know your name. I know I had one. His voice cracked. I remember. There were people, voices, bright lights, and then nothing. Just cold. And I can't. He pressed his palms against his temples. I can't remember where I'm supposed to be. Oh God, this was worse than she thought. Sarah glanced around the alley at the snow starting to fall harder at the wind picking up. The temperature was supposed to drop below freezing tonight. She'd heard it on the radio at work. "Listen," she said, making another decision she definitely couldn't afford. "You can't stay out here. You'll freeze to death." He looked at her and she saw something in his expression that made her heart hurt. Hope. Tiny and fragile, like he didn't quite dare believe it. "I don't have anywhere to go," he said simply. Sarah thought about her apartment, about her mother's face when she brought home a stranger, about Sophie's safety, about all the very logical reasons why this was a terrible idea. Then she thought about her father, about the coat he'd given away, about how he'd always said that the measure of a person wasn't what they had, but what they did when they had nothing left to give. "Yeah, well," she cleared her throat. "Neither did I once upon a time. Come on. My place is small, but at least the wind won't cut right through you." The man stared at her like she'd just offered him the moon. "I'm Sarah," she said, holding out her hand. He took it. His grip was weak, but something about the gesture felt formal, old-fashioned. "I wish I could tell you my name," he said quietly. "That's okay. We'll figure it out." Sarah pulled her hand back and gestured toward the street. "But first, let's get you somewhere warm before we both turn into popsicles. My mom's gonna have questions, I'm warning you now. She's protective, and my daughter Sophie, she's 6, and she doesn't know about stranger danger yet, which drives me crazy, but maybe in this case that's good because..." She was rambling. She always rambled when she was nervous. "Anyway, let's go." They walked out of the alley together, and Sarah tried not to think about what she was getting herself into. The snow fell faster, covering their footprints almost as soon as they made them, and somewhere in the distance, that car alarm finally stopped. The walk to her apartment building took 15 minutes. The old man moved slowly, limping slightly, and Sarah matched his pace. He didn't say anything, just followed her with that same bewildered, grateful expression. When they reached the entrance to her building with its cracked concrete steps and flickering hallway light, Sarah paused. "This is it," she said. "It's not much." "It's shelter," he replied. "That's everything." Sarah's building was one of those low-income housing complexes that the city pretended didn't exist. Peeling, paint-broken elevator walls so thin you could hear your neighbors' entire lives playing out. But it was home, or as close to home as she could afford. She unlocked the door to apartment 2B and pushed it open. "Mama," she called out, "I'm home. And, I brought someone." The sound of movement from inside. Her mother appeared in the narrow hallway, still dressed, despite the late hour, a needle and thread in her hand. Emma Jackson was 62 years old, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes went straight to the old man behind Sarah. "Baby, what?" Emma's voice trailed off. Her whole body went rigid, and she shifted slightly, positioning herself between the hallway and Sophie's bedroom door. The protective instinct was instant automatic. "Mama, please." Sarah stepped inside, gesturing for the old man to follow. He hesitated at the threshold like he needed permission. He was in the alley behind the diner, in the snow. She lowered her voice. "He doesn't remember who he is. He can't stay out there, Mama. He'll die." Emma's jaw tightened. Sarah could see the war happening behind her mother's eyes. The fear, the caution, but also something else. Recognition, maybe, of what it meant to have nothing. Her mother's gaze moved slowly over the old man, took in his shaking hands, his worn-out shoes held together with what looked like duct tape, the way he stood there swaying slightly with exhaustion. Emma's expression softened, just a fraction, but Sarah saw it. "Come in," Emma said finally. "But you leave that door to Sophie's room closed. Understand she's sleeping." "Yes, ma'am," the old man said quietly. His voice carried a strange formality that seemed at odds with his appearance. Emma moved into the tiny kitchenette and ladled soup from a pot on the stove. Bean soup stretching the ingredients as far as they could go. She set the bowl on the small table and nodded toward it. "Sit, eat." The old man sat down slowly, like his body wasn't sure it could manage it. When he picked up the spoon, Sarah noticed something. The way he held it. The careful, measured movements. Like muscle memory from another life. He ate slowly, methodically. Not like someone who was starving, but like someone who had been taught manners a long time ago. Emma and Sarah exchanged glances. "What's your name, sir?" Emma asked, settling into the chair across from him. "I don't know," he said after swallowing. "I can't remember. There are pieces, but nothing fits together. I see things, buildings, glass, numbers, but no names, no faces. He set the spoon down carefully. "I'm sorry to intrude. I know this is your home, and I'm a stranger." "You're a person who needs help," Emma corrected. "That's what you are." A sound from the hallway made them all turn. Sophie stood in her doorway, rubbing her eyes, her hair sticking up in every direction. She wore her favorite pajamas, the ones with the cartoon cats, and she clutched her stuffed bear to her chest. "Mama!" Sophie's voice was sleepy. "Who's that?" "Sophie, baby, go back to bed," Sarah said quickly. But Sophie, being Sophie, did exactly the opposite. She walked straight over to the old man and looked up at him with those wide, curious 6-year-old eyes that didn't know yet to be afraid of the world. "You look cold," she announced. Then without hesitation she held out her bear. "Here, Mr. Fuzzy keeps me warm. You can borrow him." The old man's hands froze halfway to the bear. Sarah saw his eyes fill with tears, watched his throat work as he tried to swallow them down. "Sophie, honey, he doesn't need your—" Sarah started. "Thank you," the old man whispered. He took the bear with both hands, holding it like it was made of glass. "Thank you so much." A tear rolled down his cheek. Sophie beamed at him, completely oblivious to the weight of the moment. "You're welcome. What's your name?" "I don't remember, sweetheart." Sophie considered this seriously. "That's okay. We can call you something else until you remember. How about Mr. Gray, because of your hair?" The old man smiled. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger somehow. "Mr. Gray is perfect." Sarah felt something crack open in her chest. This was crazy. Absolutely insane. She was bringing a stranger into her home, into her daughter's life, when she could barely afford to feed the 3 of them. But looking at Sophie's happy face, at her mother's softening expression, at the old man clutching a stuffed bear like it was a lifeline, Sarah thought maybe crazy was okay sometimes. "All right, Mr. Gray," she said. "You can sleep on the couch tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." "I can't thank you enough," he said softly. "Don't thank me yet," Sarah replied. "The couch is lumpy and the heater sounds like it's going to explode any minute." But when she brought out the spare blanket, the thin one with the holes in it, Mr. Gray took it like she'd handed him a treasure. That night Sarah lay awake in the bed she shared with Sophie, listening to the sounds of the apartment, the radiator clanking, her mother's soft snoring from the other room, and from the living room, nothing, just silence. She wondered what she'd just done, what complications she'd just invited into their already complicated life, but mostly she thought about those blue eyes, lost and grateful and somehow still hopeful. "Please don't let this be a mistake," she whispered into the darkness. Sophie stirred beside her, mumbling something in her sleep about bears and cold people. Sarah closed her eyes and tried not to think about the electric bill, or the rent, or tomorrow. For tonight they kept someone alive. That had to count for something. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains of apartment 2B. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee, which was strange because they only made coffee on Sundays to save money. She padded into the kitchen and found her mother at the stove scrambling eggs. Mr. Gray sat at the table, freshly washed, wearing one of her father's old shirts that Emma must have dug out from somewhere. His white hair was combed back, and in the daylight Sarah could see his face more clearly. The sharp cheekbones, the straight nose, something about him looked refined even in borrowed clothes. "Morning, Mama." Sarah kissed Emma's cheek. "You didn't have to use the good eggs." "He's a guest," Emma said simply. "Besides, Sophie already informed him he's staying forever, so we might as well feed him proper." Mr. Gray looked up, embarrassment coloring his face. "I don't want to impose. I can leave after breakfast." "And go where?" Emma set a plate in front of him. "You don't remember where you came from? It's January. You'll freeze." She pointed her spatula at him. "You can stay until we figure this out, but you'll make yourself useful. I don't keep idle hands in my house." "Yes, ma'am." Mr. Gray's response was immediate, almost military in its precision. Sarah watched the interaction carefully. There was something about the way he held himself, even sitting at their cheap table eating scrambled eggs. A kind of unconscious dignity that didn't match his circumstances. Sophie burst out of the bedroom, already chattering at full speed. "Mr. Gray, did you sleep good? Did Mr. Fuzzy keep you warm? Mama, can Mr. Gray walk me to school?" "Absolutely not," Sarah said quickly, her protective instincts kicking in. "We don't know him yet, baby." Sophie's face fell, and Mr. Gray looked down at his plate, something like shame crossing his features. His hands tightened around his fork. "Sophie, honey, go get dressed," Emma said gently. "School starts in an hour." After Sophie left, reluctantly dragging her feet, Emma turned to Mr. Gray. Don't take it personal. Sarah's just being a good mama. We've had our share of troubles, and she's learned to be careful. I understand completely, Mr. Gray said quietly. You've already done more than I could ever have expected. I don't want to cause any problems. The day passed slowly. Sarah had the morning shift at the diner, so Emma stayed home with Mr. Gray. When Sarah returned that afternoon exhausted and smelling like grease, she found something unexpected. The apartment was cleaner than it had been in months. The windows sparkled, catching the weak winter sunlight. The floors were mopped, and she could actually see the pattern on the linoleum. The dishes were done, organized in the cabinet by size. And Mr. Gray was sitting with Emma, helping her sort buttons from an old sewing kit, his movements precise and methodical. He's got good hands, Emma said, not looking up from her work. Steady. And he folded the laundry like he's been doing it in his sleep. Hospital corners on the sheets and everything. I hope you don't mind, Mr. Gray said quietly, looking up at Sarah with those clear blue eyes. I needed to do something to earn my keep. I couldn't just sit here while you both work so hard. Sarah noticed his fingers moving over the buttons, sorting them by size and color with an efficiency that seemed automatic, like his hands knew what to do even if his mind didn't remember learning it. You didn't have to do all this, Sarah said, but she was touched, grateful even. I wanted to. Mr. Gray set down a blue button carefully. It felt good to be useful, to have a purpose, even a small one. Over the next few days, a routine developed that felt almost natural. Mr. Gray slept on the couch, woke early before anyone else, and cleaned. He was meticulous about everything. The way he arranged the dishes in the cabinet, all facing the same direction. The way he lined up shoes by the door, organized by size and frequency of use. The way he folded towels into perfect thirds. The precision was almost obsessive, but it was helpful. The apartment had never been so organized. Emma started giving him small sewing projects to help with. She did alterations for neighbors to make extra money, and Mr. Gray proved surprisingly good at it. His stitches were even and tight, his measurements exact. Where'd you learn to sew? Emma asked him one afternoon. Mr. Gray paused, needle halfway through fabric. I don't know, but my hands know. It's like they remember even when my mind doesn't. On the fourth day, Sarah came home to find Mr. Gray reading to Sophie from one of her picture books. His voice was gentle, patient, and he corrected his pronunciation naturally when Sophie pointed out a word he'd said wrong. He didn't get defensive or annoyed. He just smiled and thanked her for teaching him. You're good with kids, Sarah observed, leaning against the doorframe. Mr. Gray looked up, surprise flickering across his face. I am, aren't I? He sounded amazed by his own behavior, like he was discovering something new about himself. I don't know why, but it feels familiar. Like I've done this before. Sophie was leaning against his shoulder, completely comfortable, pointing at pictures in the book. This is an elephant. They're really big, and they never forget anything. Maybe you're like an elephant, Mr. Gray, and you'll remember everything soon. Mr. Gray's hand trembled slightly as he turned the page. I hope you're right, sweetheart. That night after Sophie was asleep, the three adults sat around the small table. Emma poured tea rationing out the last of the sugar carefully. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner, doing its best to keep the cold at bay. We should take you to the hospital, Sarah said, wrapping her hands around her mug for warmth. Get you checked out. Maybe they can help with your memory. Do an MRI or something. Fear flashed across Mr. Gray's face, quick and sharp. No, please. I don't. Hospitals feel wrong. Dangerous. He gripped his cup tightly, knuckles going white. I can't explain it, but I know I can't go there. Something bad will happen if I do. Emma and Sarah exchanged glances. Emma's expression was concerned, Sarah's more skeptical. That don't make much sense, Emma said gently. Hospitals help people. I know. Logically, I know that. Mr. Gray pressed his hand to his forehead. But there's this feeling, this certainty, like instinct. I can't go there. All right, Emma said slowly. No hospitals. But we need to figure out who you are. You got family somewhere, probably. People looking for you. I keep seeing numbers, Mr. Gray said, suddenly looking up at them with confused eyes. In my dreams. Columns of numbers, percentages, profit margins. Terms like quarterly earnings and market share and leveraged buyouts. What does that mean? Sounds like you worked with money, Sarah suggested. Maybe you were an accountant or worked at a bank. Maybe. He rubbed his temples, wincing. But it's all fog, shapes in the mist. The more I try to remember, the worse my head hurts. It's like there's a wall in my mind, and every time I push against it, it pushes back harder." "Then don't push," Emma said firmly. "Let it come natural. Forcing it ain't gonna help nothing." A week passed, then two. Mr. Gray became part of their small household in ways that felt both strange and right. He learned Sophie's schedule without being told, had her backpack ready every morning with her homework folder on top. He helped Emma with her sewing work, threading needles with steady hands that never shook when he was focused. And he asked Sarah about her day every evening, listening with genuine interest as she complained about difficult customers and tight shifts. "You're different," Sarah told him one night. They were alone in the kitchen, Emma asleep and Sophie tucked in. The overhead light buzzed softly, and outside snow fell past the window. "The way you talk, the way you move, even the way you eat. You weren't always homeless, were you?" "No." Mr. Gray's voice was more certain than he'd been about anything else. "I don't know who I was, but I know I wasn't this. Sometimes I catch myself expecting things. A softer bed, a larger room, better coffee." He smiled ruefully. "Then I realize where I am, and it's like waking up from a dream I can't quite remember. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does." Sarah traced the rim of her mug. "Does it bother you being here living like this?" He looked at her and his eyes were completely serious. "This is the safest I've felt since I woke up in that alley. You gave me that, all of you. You gave me food when I was starving, shelter when I was freezing, dignity when I felt like nothing. I'll never forget it, Sarah. Even if I never remember anything else about my life, I'll remember this. I'll remember your kindness." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest, pushing back against the constant worry and stress she carried. "Well, you're earning your keep. Mama says you're the best helper she's ever had, and Sophie loves you. She's a remarkable child, so smart and kind. You're raising her well." Mr. Gray paused. "It must be hard doing it on your own." "Her father left before she was born," Sarah said, the old bitterness creeping into her voice. "Didn't want the responsibility. So, yeah, it's hard, but she's worth it. Everything I do for her. She's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her." Sarah stood, stretching her tired back. "I should get to bed. Early shift tomorrow." "Sarah," Mr. Gray's voice stopped her. "Thank you for everything. For seeing me when you could have looked away. For taking a chance on a stranger. For giving me a reason to want to remember who I am." "You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do, because I don't know if I'll get another chance." Sarah didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went to bed. But his words stayed with her, echoing in her mind as she drifted off to sleep. Sarah managed to get Mr. Gray a job at the diner. It took some convincing. Marlene, the owner, wasn't happy about it. She stood behind the register with her arms crossed, her expression skeptical, as Sarah made her pitch during the slow afternoon period. "He got any experience?" Marlene was a heavy-set woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a tongue that could cut glass. "He's clean, punctual, and strong enough to bus tables," Sarah argued, leaning against the counter. "And he works for minimum wage. When's the last time you found someone willing to do that and actually show up on time?" Marlene grunted, considering. "What's his story? Why's he need work so bad?" Sarah had prepared for this. "He's down on his luck, staying with my family temporarily, trying to get back on his feet. He's good people, Marlene. I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe that." "You got good instincts about people, I'll give you that." Marlene sighed heavily. "Fine, 2-week trial, but he messes up, he's gone. And I mean any kind of mess up. I can't afford problems." "Thank you. You won't regret it." "I better not." Mr. Gray started the next day. Sarah watched him nervously during the lunch rush, ready to jump in if he needed help. But he moved through the diner with surprising grace. He memorized the table numbers immediately, never mixed up orders, and seemed to anticipate what customers needed before they asked. He kept coffee cups filled, cleared plates efficiently, and even managed to calm down an angry customer who'd been kept waiting too long. "Where'd you find him?" Frank asked, flipping burgers on the grill. Frank was the day cook, a thin man with tattooed arms and a good heart. "He moves like professional waitstaff, real smooth." "No idea," Sarah admitted, watching Mr. Gray navigate the narrow space between tables without bumping into anyone. "But he's good, right? Real good. Too good for this place if you ask me. He's got that thing that polish, like he's done better work than this." The comment stuck with Sarah. Frank was right. Mr. Gray was too good at everything. Too polished, too refined. Even in his borrowed clothes and worn shoes, there was something about him that didn't quite fit the image of a drifter down on his luck. It was his third day at the diner when things got strange. The lunch rush had ended, and the diner had settled into its afternoon lull. A few stragglers sat in booths nursing coffee and pie. Marlene was at the register muttering under her breath, papers spread across the counter. Her face was red, and she kept erasing numbers in her ledger, rewriting them, erasing again. "Damn accountant," she growled loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "These numbers don't add up. We're short $300 somewhere, and I can't figure out where. And he wants to charge me $200 to come look at it again. Highway robbery." Mr. Gray was wiping down the table next to the register, methodical as always. He glanced over just a quick look and froze. Sarah watched his eyes move across the papers. Scanning. Processing. His brow furrowed with concentration. "Line 3, Mr. Gray said suddenly, his voice cutting through Marlene's muttering. "The total should be $450, not $540. You calculated compound interest but forgot to subtract the service fee from the supplier. And line 7 is missing the cost of goods sold from Tuesday's delivery. The invoice is probably in your other folder." The entire diner went quiet. Even the stragglers looked up from their coffee. Marlene slowly turned to stare at Mr. Gray, her mouth hanging open. "What did you just say?" Mr. Gray blinked, looking confused like he'd just woken up from a trance. The numbers, they're wrong. The books don't balance because—" He stopped, pressing his hand to his forehead. "I don't know how I know that. I just looked at the page and I could see it. The errors, the missing pieces. It was automatic." Marlene snatched up her papers with shaking hands and checked. Her eyes went wide, then wider. "Holy hell, he's right. Every single thing he said is right." She looked at Mr. Gray like he'd just performed magic. "The invoice from Tuesday is in my car. I forgot to enter it. And the interest calculation, I did it wrong. But how did you— Who the hell are you?" "I don't know, mister," Gray said, and he sounded frightened. His hands were shaking now, the rag dropping to the floor. "I saw the numbers, and I just knew. Like breathing. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. But I don't remember learning it. I don't remember studying accounting or finance or anything. It's just there in my head." Sarah's heart was pounding. She moved quickly to Mr. Gray's side, guiding him to sit in the nearest booth. "Easy. Just breathe." He collapsed into the seat, breathing hard. "There are more numbers in my head. Stock prices, market trends, corporate structures, terms like amortization schedules and depreciation tables and capital gains tax. It's all there, Sarah. It's all just sitting there in my brain like a filing cabinet, but I don't remember putting it there." Frank leaned over the counter, his eyes wide. "Sounds like you were some kind of accountant. Or a business guy. Finance manager or something." "A finance manager doesn't end up in a dumpster," Marlene said bluntly, but her voice was gentler now. "Something happened to you, Mr. Gray. Something bad." Mr. Gray's hands were shaking harder. He pressed them flat on the table, trying to still them. "I keep seeing flashes, brief images, a car, headlights so bright they hurt, someone shouting. Fear. Real fear. Then running. I was running from something. Or someone. And I couldn't stop. I just kept running until I didn't know where I was anymore." Sarah knelt beside the booth, taking his hands in hers. They were ice cold despite the diner's warmth. "It's okay. We'll figure it out. Whatever happened, whatever you're running from, we'll figure it out together." "What if I did something terrible?" Mr. Gray whispered, his blue eyes desperate. "What if that's why I can't remember? What if my mind is protecting me from something awful I did? What if I'm running from the police?" "Stop!" Sarah squeezed his hands tighter. "Listen to me. I've seen bad men in my life. I've known bad men. They don't clean apartments for free. They don't read bedtime stories to little girls. They don't cry when a child gives them a teddy bear. Whatever you were, whoever you are, I don't think you're bad. I think you're scared and hurt and lost, but not bad." Mr. Gray closed his eyes, and a tear slipped down his weathered cheek. "I want to believe that. Then believe it. I do." That evening, after their shift ended, Sarah and Mr. Gray walked home together through the darkening streets. The snow had stopped, but the air was bitter cold, turning their breath to white clouds. "I'm scared," Mr. Gray admitted quietly. "What if my memory comes back, and I don't like what I find? What if the person I was isn't someone worth remembering?" "Then we'll deal with it," Sarah said firmly, her voice strong despite her own doubts. "Together. You're not alone in this anymore, Mr. Gray. You've got me. You've got Mama. You've got Sophie. Whatever comes, you've got us." He looked at her and something passed between them. Understanding, trust. The kind that couldn't be earned quickly, but somehow had been earned anyway, built in the space between garbage bags and scrambled eggs and quiet conversations in a tiny kitchen. "I don't deserve you," he said softly. "Maybe not, but you've got me anyway, so deal with it." A small smile crossed his face, the first real smile Sarah had seen from him. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, less lost. When they got home, Sophie was waiting with a drawing she'd made at school. A picture of their family drawn in crayon with the careful intensity only a 6-year-old could manage. 4 figures holding hands, Emma with her gray hair, Sarah with her curly hair, Sophie with her big smile, and a tall figure with white hair labeled Mr. Gray in Sophie's careful letters. "That's us," Sophie announced proudly, holding the drawing up. "That's our family. My teacher said I had to draw my family, so I drew all of us." Mr. Gray took the drawing with trembling hands, staring at it like it was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "Can I keep this?" "Of course." Sophie beamed, delighted by his reaction. "You're family now. You live with us, and you help Grandma, and you walk with Mama, and you read me stories. That's what families do." Mr. Gray carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into his shirt pocket right over his heart. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. "Thank you, Sophie. I'll treasure this forever." That night, lying in bed next to her sleeping daughter, Sarah thought about the mystery that was Mr. Gray, about the numbers he could see, and the fear in his eyes, about the life he couldn't remember and the person he was becoming in spite of that. Whatever happened next, whoever he turned out to be, she was glad she'd stopped in that alley, glad she'd shared her burger, glad she'd taken the chance. Because sometimes the best things in life came from the moments when you chose kindness over convenience. 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of domesticity. Mr. Gray settled into his new life with an ease that surprised everyone, including himself. But Sarah noticed things, little things that didn't add up. The way he straightened his collar, even though it was just a borrowed shirt from her dead father. The way he held himself spine straight, shoulders back, like someone who was used to command. The way he sometimes reached for things that weren't there, like his hands expected better cutlery or finer glasses. And his hands. They were healing from the cold and roughness of street living, and underneath they were the hands of someone who'd never done hard labor. No calluses from construction work, no scars from kitchen accidents. They were soft, well-kept hands despite weeks of living rough. It was a Thursday afternoon, gray and drizzling when everything changed. Sarah was taking out the trash again, same alley, same dumpster. The rain had turned the alley into a mess of puddles and floating garbage, the water reflecting the gray sky like dirty mirrors. She was about to head back inside, already thinking about the evening shift and what she'd make for dinner, when something caught her eye. A piece of paper soaked through, plastered against the brick wall near the dumpster. Most of it was illegible, the ink bleeding into formless blobs of color, but part of an image was still visible, a face. Sarah's heart stopped. She moved closer, her shoes splashing through puddles. She peeled the paper off the wall carefully, gently, but it tore in places anyway. The cheap paper couldn't handle the moisture, but enough remained, enough to see. A photograph, professional quality, even degraded by rain, and text underneath, though most of it was unreadable, bleeding into the wet paper like watercolors. "Missing person" was clear at the top, printed in bold black letters that had survived the rain better than the rest. And the face, even blurred by rain and mud, even distorted by the soggy paper, she knew that face. The sharp cheekbones, the straight nose, those eyes, even in black and white, looked familiar. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered to the empty alley. Her hands shook as she tried to make out more words. Most were gone, dissolved into gray streaks, but fragments remained. "Alexander, Pierce, Chairman, substantial reward, contact." The paper was disintegrating in her hands, falling apart, like her understanding of the past 3 weeks. She ran back into the diner, not caring that she was dripping mud across Marlene's clean floors, not caring about the customers who looked up in surprise. Mr. Gray was refilling the napkin dispensers at table 7, methodical as always. He looked up when Sarah burst in, and his smile faded immediately at her expression. Something in her face told him everything was about to change. "Sarah, what's wrong?" She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up. She just held out the ruined flyer with shaking hands. Mr. Gray took it carefully, like it might burn him. His eyes moved across what little text remained, then to the photograph which, despite the damage, was clearly him or someone who looked exactly like him. Younger in the photo cleaner wearing an expensive suit, but unmistakably him. The napkin dispenser fell from his hand, clattering across the floor. Napkins scattered everywhere, white against the dark linoleum. That's... His voice broke, failed completely. He tried again. That's me. Marlene came over Frank right behind her, both drawn by the commotion. They crowded around, staring at the flyer that was falling apart in Mr. Gray's trembling hands. Alexander Pierce, Frank read aloud from the barely visible text, squinting at the water-damaged letters. Chairman and CEO of Pierce Global Corporation, missing since December. Substantial reward for information. Pierce Global. Marlene's eyes went huge, her hand flying to her mouth. Holy Mary, Mother of God, that's one of the biggest corporations in the country. They own half the commercial real estate downtown. They're worth billions. With a B. Mr. Gray, or Alexander, or whoever he was, swayed on his feet. His face had gone absolutely white, drained of all color. Sarah caught his arm just as his knees buckled. Sit down, right now, before you fall down. He collapsed into the nearest booth, the ruined flyer still clutched in his hands. He stared at it like it was written in a language he couldn't quite read. I'm a CEO. He sounded like he didn't believe his own words, like the concept was completely foreign. I run a corporation, a billion-dollar corporation. According to this, you don't just run it, Marlene said, her voice hushed with something like awe. You built it. You're Alexander Pierce. You're famous in the business world. My late husband used to read about you in the Wall Street Journal. Said you were a genius. Ruthless, but a genius. Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Her stomach twisted into knots. Billions of dollars. That was more money than she could even conceptualize. That was more money than existed in her entire world. And Mr. Gray, this man who'd been sleeping on her lumpy couch and eating her scrambled eggs and helping her mother with sewing, he was worth that much. The reward alone is $50,000, Frank said, still reading the fragments of text he could make out. 50 grand just for information leading to finding you. $50,000. Sarah's mind spun. That was more money than she'd see in 5 years of working double shifts. That was Sophie's college fund. That was her mother's medical bills paid off. That was security, real security for the first time in her life. And Mr. Gray Alexander, whatever his name was, he wasn't just some homeless man she'd saved. He was someone important, someone powerful, someone who lived in a completely different world than she did, a world she couldn't even imagine, someone who had no reason to stay in her cramped apartment now that he knew the truth. I need to remember. Alexander gripped the table edge until his knuckles went white, the tendons standing out on his hands. Why can't I remember? Why can't I see it? My company, my life, any of it. The flyer mentioned an accident, Sarah said, still staring at the ruined paper. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, like someone else was speaking. A car accident in early December. Maybe you hit your head, got a concussion that can cause memory loss. Someone was chasing me. Alexander's voice was distant, like he was reaching for something just out of grasp, something hidden in fog. I remember that now, clearer than before. Headlights, so bright they blinded me. And then impact, metal crunching, glass breaking. And then I was running. I ran and ran until I didn't know where I was anymore, until I didn't know who I was anymore. Why would someone chase you? Frank asked, his voice gentle. I don't know, but I was terrified. I remember the fear more than anything else. Pure animal fear. So I kept running. Alexander looked up at Sarah, and she saw tears in his eyes sliding down his weathered cheeks. If I hadn't run, if I'd just stayed and gotten help, I wouldn't have ended up in that alley. You wouldn't have had to save me. You wouldn't have had to give up your dinner to feed a stranger. Stop, Sarah said, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. You were hurt and scared. You did what you thought you had to do to survive. Marlene was reading what was left of the flyer, her finger tracing the visible words. Says here there's a daughter, Olivia Pierce. She's the one who posted these flyers all over the city. She's the one offering the reward. She looked at Alexander with something like pity. You got a kid looking for you, a daughter who thinks you might be dead. Alexander's face crumpled like paper. I have a daughter. You do. And if this is real, if you're really Alexander Pierce, she's probably going crazy, wondering where you are, wondering if you're alive or dead. Sarah's mind was racing, spinning through implications and possibilities and fears she didn't want to name. This changed everything. Everything. Alexander wasn't just some lost old man. He was someone's father, someone important to a lot of people. He had a life, a real life, a wealthy, powerful life, waiting for him somewhere. A life that didn't include a struggling waitress and her family in a cramped two-bedroom apartment. "We have to call," Sarah said, even though the words hurt coming out, even though she felt like she was losing something precious. "We have to let them know you're alive. Your daughter needs to know." "Not yet." Alexander grabbed her hand across the table, his grip desperate. "Please, I need to remember first. I need to know what happened, why I ran. What if I was running for a good reason? What if going back is dangerous? What if whoever tried to kill me is still out there? Or," Marlene said carefully, her voice the voice of reason, "what if you just got confused and scared after a head injury? What if you ran because you were disoriented and frightened, and now your family is desperate to find you? What if every day you don't contact them is another day they're suffering?" Alexander's hands were shaking again, the tremor visible even as he gripped the table. "I see flashes, brief images. A woman, young, dark hair pulled back, wearing a business suit. She's crying. Her face is red and swollen like she's been crying for days. Is that my daughter? Is that Olivia? I don't—" He pressed his hands to his head, fingers digging into his temples. "Why can't I remember my own child's face? What kind of father doesn't remember his daughter?" Sarah felt her own tears coming hot and unwelcome. This was too much, too big, too complicated. She was just a waitress trying to make rent and raise her kid. She couldn't handle corporate intrigue and missing billionaires and whatever complex web Alexander Pierce had been caught in. But then she looked at his terrified face, at the way his hands shook, at the genuine anguish in his eyes, and she knew she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not when he needed her. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier now. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to finish this shift like professionals. Then we're going to go home and talk to my mama because she's got more sense than both of us put together. And then we're going to figure out the right thing to do. Together. As a team." Alexander nodded, still gripping her hand like it was a lifeline in a storm. "What if they don't believe it's me? What if I've been gone so long they've moved on? What if they don't want me back?" "Then we'll deal with that too," Sarah said, even though she had no idea how. "But first things first. You need to remember. Or at least you need to try. And you need to be ready for what comes next, whatever that is." "What if I don't want what comes next?" Alexander asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if the life I had before was the reason I ended up in that alley? What if it was cold and empty and meaningless? What if this right here with you and Emma and Sophie is better than whatever I left behind?" Sarah didn't have an answer for that. She didn't have an answer for any of this. The address on the flyer, pieced together from the fragments Sarah could read, led them to West Hills. Sarah had heard of the neighborhood, of course. Everyone had. It was the kind of place that showed up in magazines, in movies, in the dreams of people who bought lottery tickets, where the houses were called estates and the lawns were bigger than city parks, where the property taxes alone were more than Sarah made in a year. She'd never actually been there. Never had any reason to venture into that rarefied world of wealth and privilege. Sarah had borrowed money from Marlene for a cab, promising to pay it back from her next paycheck. She couldn't afford it, not really, but this felt important, essential even. Alexander sat beside her in the back seat, wearing the cleanest clothes they could put together. One of her father's old button-downs pressed carefully by Emma until the creases were sharp, pants that were slightly too short but decent enough. He looked nervous, no more than nervous. He looked terrified, his hands clenched in his lap, his breathing shallow. "We can turn around," Sarah said softly, watching the neighborhoods change as they drove. The buildings getting nicer, the cars getting newer, the streets getting cleaner. "If you're not ready, if you need more time, I have to know." Alexander's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him, shaking despite his attempts to control them. "I have a daughter, Olivia. She's looking for me. She thinks I might be dead. I can't hide forever. She deserves to know I'm alive." The cab turned onto Sterling Boulevard, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a nice neighborhood. This was something else entirely. The houses here weren't houses. They were monuments to wealth. Stone and glass and wrought iron, each one more impressive than the last. Manicured lawns that probably required full-time staff. Gates and walls and security systems visible even from the street. "Which number?" The driver asked, his voice neutral, but his eyes curious in the rear-view mirror. 1523, Alexander said, his voice barely audible. The cab slowed in front of a set of gates that looked like they belonged to a palace. 12 feet tall, ornate wrought iron with gold accents flanked by stone pillars that had to be 8 feet wide. Beyond them, a long driveway curved up to a mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie about old money and American aristocracy. Sarah felt herself getting smaller, shrinking. This was where Alexander belonged, this world of wealth and privilege and power so far removed from her reality, it might as well be another planet, another dimension entirely. She looked down at her worn coat, her cheap shoes with the sole coming loose, her hands rough from work and washing dishes and scrubbing floors. She didn't belong here. She was a smudge of dirt in a pristine world. "We're here," the driver said. Alexander didn't move. He stared at the gates like they might swallow him whole, like they were the mouth of some great beast waiting to devour him. "Do you remember it?" Sarah asked quietly. "No. Yes. Maybe." He closed his eyes, his face twisted with concentration. "I remember the gates. I remember driving through them every day, morning and evening. But it's like watching someone else's life, like a movie I saw once and can barely recall." Sarah paid the driver, using up the last of Marlene's loan. $43 for a 20-minute drive, highway robbery, but she handed it over without complaint. They stood on the sidewalk, two small figures before the imposing entrance, and Sarah had never felt more out of place in her life. "There's an intercom." Sarah pointed out, her voice small. "On the pillar there." Alexander walked to it like a man approaching his own execution. Each step seemed to require effort, like he was moving through water. His finger hovered over the button for a long moment, trembling, before he finally pressed it. Static crackled through the speaker. Then a woman's voice, efficient and professional, and probably paid more than Sarah made in a month. "Pierce Residence, how may I help you?" Alexander opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His throat worked, but no sound emerged. Sarah stepped up beside him, finding strength she didn't know she had. "We're here to see Olivia Pierce. It's about her father, about Alexander Pierce." A pause. A long pause. "Regarding what matter, please?" "Just tell her someone's here about Alexander Pierce. Tell her it's important, please." Another pause, even longer this time. Sarah could almost hear the internal debate happening on the other end. Then, one moment, they waited. Sarah was acutely aware of everything wrong with her appearance. Her coat with the missing button, her shoes that needed replacing, the way her hair was frizzy from the rain, the way she probably looked like she didn't belong here because she didn't. This wasn't her world. Would never be her world. The intercom crackled again. A different voice this time, younger, higher, urgent, with barely contained emotion. "Who is this? If this is some kind of cruel joke, I swear to God." "Olivia." Alexander's voice broke on the name, cracked right down the middle. Are you Olivia?" Silence. Complete and utter silence. Then barely a whisper, disbelieving and desperate and full of hope that was almost painful to hear. "Dad." "I think so," Alexander said, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry, I can't remember everything. I can't see your face in my mind, but I think I'm your father. I think I'm Alexander Pierce." The gates swung open so fast they nearly hit Sarah. The motors hummed with expensive efficiency, and then a woman was running down the driveway, her heels clicking on the pavement before she kicked them off and kept running barefoot. She was maybe 30, with dark hair streaming behind her, wearing an expensive pantsuit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. Even from a distance, even running and disheveled, she looked polished, put together, like someone who belonged in this world of wealth and power. She stopped about 10 feet away, her hand flying to her mouth, staring at Alexander like he was a ghost, like he was something she'd given up hoping to see. "Dad." Her voice shook, broke, reformed. "Is it really you? Please tell me this is real. Please tell me I'm not dreaming." Alexander took a step forward, his own hands shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't remember your face clearly. I don't remember your childhood or your graduation or any of the things a father should remember, but I know you're important to me. I know I've been looking for you in my dreams. I know you matter." Olivia broke. She ran the last few steps and threw her arms around Alexander, sobbing into his shoulder with the kind of raw emotion that made Sarah's chest ache. "You're alive. Oh God, you're alive. We thought you were dead. The accident, and then you disappeared, and we looked everywhere, Dad. We looked everywhere. Police, private investigators, search parties. We've been searching for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of not knowing if you were alive or dead or suffering somewhere. Alexander's arms came up slowly, uncertainly, like he wasn't sure he had the right. Then they closed around her tight, holding her like she might disappear. "I'm sorry," he kept saying over and over like a prayer. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I worried you. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry." Sarah backed away, giving them space, giving them privacy for this moment that had nothing to do with her. She felt like an intruder on something sacred, something private, this reunion that belonged to them, to their family, to their world. But then Olivia pulled back, keeping her hands on Alexander's shoulders like she was afraid he'd vanish if she let go. Her eyes, red and swollen, and still streaming with tears, moved to Sarah, really looked at her for the first time. "Who are you?" Sarah's throat went dry. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I'm nobody. Just someone who helped him when he needed it." "Nobody." Alexander turned, reaching for Sarah's hand, pulling her forward when she tried to stay back. "This is Sarah Jackson. She saved my life. She found me in an alley, freezing and confused and half dead, and she took me home, fed me, gave me shelter. She and her family took care of me when I had nothing, when I was nothing." Olivia's eyes widened. She looked at Sarah properly now, really seeing her, taking in the worn coat, the cheap clothes, the exhausted eyes of someone who worked too hard for too little, the visible signs of a life spent struggling. "You took care of my father." Her voice was thick with emotion. "You brought him into your home." "I did what anyone should do," Sarah said quietly, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Most people wouldn't have stopped. Most people would have walked past, pretended not to see, told themselves it wasn't their problem. "No." Olivia's voice was firm, certain. Most people would have walked past. Most people wouldn't have risked bringing a stranger home, especially these days, especially someone who could have been dangerous. "You saved him." She stepped forward and did something Sarah didn't expect, something that made her stiffen with discomfort. She hugged her, this wealthy stranger in her expensive suit, hugged Sarah like they were family. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know how to repay you. I don't know how to express how grateful I am." Sarah stood rigid, uncomfortable with the embrace, with the gratitude, with everything about this situation. This world wasn't hers. These people weren't her people. She'd done what she'd done because it was right, not for thanks or rewards or recognition. When Olivia pulled back, she was still crying. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling too, smiling through the tears. "Please come inside, both of you. We have so much to talk about, so much to figure out. Please." "I should go," Sarah said quickly, already backing toward the street. "You two need time together. Family time. I'll just catch another cab, head back to work." "No." Alexander's voice was sharp, almost panicked. "Don't go. Please. I need you here. I don't know how to do this without you." Sarah looked at his frightened face, at the way his hands reached for her, like she was his anchor in a storm, and she couldn't refuse. She couldn't leave him, even though every instinct told her she didn't belong here. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll stay. For a little while." The inside of the mansion was even more overwhelming than the outside. Marble floors that probably cost more than Sarah's entire apartment building. Crystal chandeliers that caught and refracted light into rainbow patterns. Art on the walls that Sarah recognized from high school art history class pieces that belonged in museums. Furniture that looked antique and was probably worth more than she'd make in 10 lifetimes. She felt like a smudge of dirt in a pristine world, like she was leaving invisible traces of poverty and struggle on everything she touched. Olivia led them to a sitting room that was bigger than Sarah's entire apartment. Bigger and more beautiful, with windows overlooking manicured gardens and a fireplace that actually worked, flames dancing behind a glass screen. She called for staff, and suddenly there were people bringing tea and fine china, bringing blankets that were probably cashmere, asking if Alexander needed anything at all. Sarah perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her car, afraid to sit back, fully afraid she'd somehow damage it or mark it or ruin it with her presence. "Tell me everything," Olivia said, sitting across from Alexander, leaning forward with desperate intensity. "What happened after the accident? Where have you been? Are you hurt? Should I call a doctor?" "I don't remember much," Alexander admitted, his voice tired, old. "There was a car accident. Someone forced me off the road. I remember being scared, terrified, actually. So I ran. I don't know why I ran instead of waiting for help. I just remember the fear, and then running, and then nothing. Blank spaces. and then I woke up in an alley with no memory of who I was or how I got there." "The police said someone ran you off the road deliberately," Olivia said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Corporate espionage, they think. Someone trying to get you out of the way before the Turner merger. Trying to stop the deal or steal the terms or something. You disappeared from the accident scene before the ambulance arrived. They found your car, but not you. We've been searching for 6 weeks, Dad. 6 weeks of hell." 6 weeks. Sarah did the math quickly. She'd found him about 4 weeks ago. Where had he been for those first 2 weeks, wandering, surviving somehow? The thought made her chest ache. "I'm sorry," Alexander said again, the words seemingly the only ones he knew anymore. "I'm sorry I worried you. I'm sorry I put you through this. You're alive. That's all that matters now." Olivia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara. "We'll get you the best doctors, neurologists, specialists, whatever you need. We'll help you remember. We'll piece it all back together. Whatever you need, Dad. Whatever it takes." She turned to Sarah, and her expression was earnest, grateful, almost reverent. "And you. I owe you everything. Please let me repay you. The reward money on the flyer was just a starting point. I'll give you whatever you need, whatever you want. Name it." "I don't want money," Sarah said quickly, the words coming out harsher than she intended. Defensive. "I didn't help him for money. I helped him because he needed help. That's it." "I know. I can see that. But please let me do something. Let me—" "No." Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the expensive floor. "I'm glad he's home. I'm really glad he's safe and with his family. But I need to go now. I have work. My daughter needs to be picked up from school. I have a life to get back to." She headed for the door before anyone could stop her, before she could say something she'd regret, before the emotion building in her chest could spill out. The mansion, the wealth, the stark reminder of how different their worlds were. It was suffocating. She couldn't breathe. She made it outside, past the pristine gardens, past the gates that were still open onto the sidewalk, before Alexander caught up to her. He was out of breath, not used to running anymore. "Sarah, stop. Please." She turned, and she hated that her eyes were wet, hated the weakness. "You're home. You're with your daughter. This is where you belong, Alexander. In that mansion with your billions of dollars and your expensive life. Not in my cramped apartment eating cheap eggs." "Then why does it feel wrong?" Alexander grabbed her hands, his grip desperate. "Why do I feel more at home in your 2-bedroom apartment than in that mansion? Why does the thought of staying here make me want to run again?" "Because you don't remember your real life yet," Sarah said, pulling her hands back. "Once you do, once your memory comes back fully, you'll see. You'll remember who you really are and what you really want. This is your world, Alexander, not mine. I'm just a waitress who got lucky enough to help someone important." "Sarah, I have to get back to work," she interrupted, her voice firmer now. "Sophie needs to be picked up from school in an hour. I have bills to pay and shifts to cover and a life that doesn't include mansions and private security and whatever complicated corporate world you came from. This was good. I'm happy for you. I'm happy you're home and safe, but this is where we say goodbye." She walked away, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She didn't look back, even though she could feel Alexander watching her go, even though every step felt like she was tearing away a piece of herself. The cab ride home ate up the last of her money she didn't really have. Sarah walked into her apartment to find Emma waiting, concern written all over her weathered face. "How'd it go, baby?" "He's home," Sarah said, her voice flat, emotionless. "He's got a daughter, a mansion, a billion-dollar company, a whole life. That's good, isn't it? That's what we wanted." "Yeah." Sarah headed to her room, needing to be alone. "It's real good." She closed the door and let herself cry. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside, crying for the loss of something she'd never really had, for the friend who'd become family, for the impossible fantasy that someone like him could stay in her world. She cried herself out, then washed her face and went to pick up Sophie from school. Life went on. It always did. 3 days passed. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Sarah threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts, staying busy so she wouldn't think, wouldn't remember, wouldn't miss the old man who used to help fold laundry and read bedtime stories with perfect patience. Sophie kept asking when Mr. Gray was coming back, her 6-year-old face confused and hurt. "Did I do something wrong? Did I make him mad? Why doesn't he visit anymore?" "He went home, baby," Sarah explained for the 5th time. "He found his real family, his real home." But we're his family too, Sophie protested, her lower lip trembling. He said so. He kept my drawing. He promised he'd never forget us. Sarah had no answer for that. Emma said nothing, but her knowing looks said everything. Her mother had always been able to see right through her, to see the hurt Sarah tried to hide. On the fourth day, Sarah was clearing tables during the lunch rush when the diner went silent. That strange, sudden silence that meant something was either very wrong or very right. The kind of silence that made you look up from whatever you were doing. She looked up. A black Mercedes was parked outside, sleek and expensive, and completely out of place on their run-down street. The kind of car that cost more than most people's houses. And walking through the door, looking like a completely different person, was Alexander Pierce. He wore a tailored navy suit that had probably been custom-made by some designer whose name Sarah wouldn't recognize. His white hair was professionally cut and styled. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He wore a watch that probably cost 6 figures. He looked like what he was, powerful, wealthy, in command. A man who could buy this entire neighborhood and barely notice the expense. But his eyes were the same. Those clear blue eyes, uncertain and searching, and somehow still vulnerable. Every customer in the diner was staring. Marlene stood behind the counter with her mouth hanging open, her spatula frozen halfway to a plate. Frank had stopped flipping burgers. Even the coffee maker seemed to pause mid-percolate. Alexander walked straight to Sarah, weaving between tables with the confidence of someone who'd commanded boardrooms. He stopped right in front of her, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi." Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "You look different. Like yourself, I guess. I feel different. The doctors say my memory is coming back. Slowly in pieces, but it's coming." He glanced around the diner, taking in the stares, the silence. "Can we talk, please?" "I'm working. Take your break," Marlene called out, finding her voice. "Right now, Sarah. Go." "That's an order." Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to stay busy, wanted to avoid whatever was about to happen. But the look on Marlene's face, the way Alexander was standing there, like he'd wait forever if he had to, left her no choice. She led him outside to the same alley where this had all started, where she'd found him digging through garbage, desperate and lost. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. "You shouldn't be here," Sarah said, crossing her arms defensively. "You've got a whole company to run, don't you? Board meetings and mergers and whatever else billionaires do with their time." "I do. And I have a board meeting in 2 hours that I'm probably going to be late for. But I had to come here first. I had to see you." Alexander stepped closer, and Sarah fought the urge to step back. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how that mansion is my world and not yours." "It's true." "No, it's not." His voice was firm, certain. "My world, my real world, is corporate boards and hostile takeovers and people who smile while they stab you in the back. My world is empty penthouses and lonely dinners and relationships based on what I can do for people. Your world is taking care of a stranger because it's the right thing to do. Your world is a little girl who shares her teddy bear with a man who looks scary. Your world is real, Sarah. Mine is just expensive." Sarah's throat tightened. She swallowed hard. "What do you want, Alexander? Why are you really here? I want to do something right for once in my life. I've spent 30 years making money, building empires, crushing competitors. And what did it get me? Someone tried to kill me. I ended up alone in an alley, and the only people who cared were strangers who had no reason to help, who had every reason not to help." He pulled out a business card, heavy stock with embossed lettering. "This is Olivia's card. She runs the Pierce Foundation, our charitable trust. She wants to hire you." "What?" Sarah stared at the card like it might bite her. "As a program director, someone who actually understands what poverty looks like, what people really need. Someone who won't just throw money at problems, but will actually solve them." He pressed the card into her hand, and it felt heavy, weighted with possibility. "The salary is $80,000 a year, plus full benefits, medical and dental and vision, plus a college fund for Sophie that will pay for any school she wants to attend all the way through graduate school if she chooses, including housing, books, everything." Sarah's knees went weak. She reached out to steady herself against the brick wall. $80,000. That was impossible. That was more money than she'd ever dreamed of making. That was security, real security. That was Sophie's future. That was her mother's medical bills paid off. That was never having to choose between electricity and groceries again. "I can't accept this," she whispered, but even as she said it, She knew how stupid it sounded. It's charity. You're doing this because you feel guilty. Because you're exactly what we need. Alexander interrupted, his voice strong. Certain. Olivia spent 3 days researching poverty programs after I got home. She read every proposal that's crossed her desk in 5 years. Every grant application, every outcome report, every program evaluation. And you know what she realized? They're all written by people who've never been poor. People who've studied poverty in textbooks but never lived it. They're full of good intentions and bad assumptions. We need someone who knows, someone who's lived it, someone who understands what it's actually like to be one missed paycheck away from homelessness. I'm not qualified. I didn't even finish college. I dropped out when I got pregnant with Sophie. You're more qualified than anyone else we could hire. You saved a man's life with nothing but compassion and a burger. You managed a household on poverty wages and still had enough left over to share. You raised a kind, intelligent daughter despite every obstacle society put in your way. If that's not qualified, I don't know what is. Sarah looked at the business card, at the embossed logo of the Pierce Foundation. At the future, it represented shimmering like a mirage. What about my job here? Marlene needs me. I can't just abandon her. I already talked to Marlene this morning before you got here. Paid off her business loan too, but don't tell her I told you. She said if you don't take this opportunity, she'll fire you herself. She's happy for you, Sarah. Everyone who cares about you wants this for you. I need to think about it. This is too big, too fast. Think fast. Olivia wants to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9. Alexander reached out, hesitated, then touched her shoulder gently. You saved my life, Sarah. Let me help change yours. Please. Let me do one good thing with all this money. One thing that actually matters. He left her standing in the alley, holding a business card that weighed almost nothing, but felt like it held the entire world. Holding possibility and fear and hope, all wrapped in embossed cardstock. That night, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with Emma and Sophie, the business card placed in the center, like an artifact, like something precious and dangerous all at once. Take it, Emma said immediately, no hesitation. Don't be stupid, baby. But what if I can't do it? What if I fail? What if I get there and realize I don't belong? Then you fail. But at least Sophie will have her college paid for. At least we won't have to choose between electricity and groceries. At least you'll have tried. Emma reached across and covered Sarah's hand with her own, worn and weathered from years of hard work. Baby, you've been struggling your whole life, working 2 jobs since you were 16, raising Sophie alone, taking care of me. Someone's offering you a chance to stop struggling, to breathe, to build something better. Take it. Will Mr. Gray be there? Sophie asked, her voice small and hopeful. Will I get to see him again? Maybe sometimes, Sarah said, her throat tight. He's very busy now. He has his real life back. I miss him. Sophie's face was sad, her eyes downcast. He was nice. He never got mad when I asked questions. He read the same story 3 times and never complained. He made Grandma laugh. He was nice. Sarah agreed softly. He is nice. That didn't change. She looked at the card again, at the opportunity it represented, at the fear and hope warring in her chest like physical forces. This was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. She'd be working with educated people, wealthy people, people who spoke languages of privilege and power she barely understood. She'd be responsible for programs and budgets and decisions that affected real lives. But she'd also have the chance to actually help people, to use her experience, her knowledge, her understanding of what it meant to be poor and desperate and scared, to make sure resources went where they were actually needed, not where some bureaucrat thought they should go. Okay, she said softly, the word barely audible. I'll do it. I'll try. Emma smiled, her eyes wet with tears. That's my girl. Sophie cheered, jumping up from her chair. Does this mean we're rich now? No, baby. It means we're going to be okay. That's even better. The Pierce Foundation offices were everything Sarah expected and dreaded. Glass and steel modern art people in designer suits who looked like they'd never missed a meal in their lives. Sarah wore her best outfit, which was a thrift store blazer and a pair of pants that almost matched. She felt like a child playing dress-up. Olivia met her in the lobby, all warm smiles and gratitude. Sarah, I'm so glad you came. Let me show you around. The foundation took up 3 floors of the building. They funded everything from homeless shelters to job training programs to medical clinics in underserved areas. The budget was bigger than the GDP of some small countries. "Your office will be here," Olivia said, opening a door to a space that was bigger than Sarah's bedroom, windows overlooking the city, a desk that looked like it belonged in a museum, a computer so new it probably hadn't been released to the public yet. "This is too much," Sarah whispered. "This is standard." Olivia handed her a folder. "Here's the breakdown of our current programs and their outcomes. I'd like you to review them and give me your honest assessment. What's working? What isn't? What we're missing?" Sarah flipped through the folder. Pages and pages of data of programs of money being spent. "You want my opinion on all this? I want your expertise." Olivia's voice was firm. "Sarah, my father was right. We've been operating from theory, not reality. We need someone who knows what it's actually like. That's you." Over the next few weeks, Sarah dove into the work. She read every proposal, every outcome report, every budget, and she started to see the patterns, the waste, the good intentions that missed the mark, like the job training program that required business clothes for interviews but didn't provide them, the food bank that was only open during working hours when most people who needed it couldn't get there, the housing assistance that required 3 months of pay stubs which homeless people obviously didn't have. She compiled her findings into a report. Her hands shook as she emailed it to Olivia. The response came within an hour. "Come to my office now." Sarah's heart sank. She'd been too critical, too harsh. She was going to get fired on her first real assignment. But when she got to Olivia's office, the younger woman was smiling. "This is brilliant," Olivia said, waving the report. "You found problems we didn't even know existed, and your solutions are practical, achievable, and would actually help people." "Really? Really? I want to implement these changes immediately, starting with restructuring our job assistance program using your recommendations." Sarah felt dizzy with relief and pride, but not everyone was happy with the new hire. Brad Morrison worked in program development. He was 35, white, Princeton educated, and had been with the foundation for 8 years. He made sure Sarah knew it too. "So you're the new charity case," he said on her second week, his voice dripping with condescension. Olivia does love her feel-good stories. Sarah ignored him, but Brad wasn't done. "No college degree, no experience, but here you are with a corner office and a salary most of us had to work years to earn. Must be nice having connections." "I don't have connections," Sarah said quietly. "I have experience you'll never have." "Experience being poor," Brad laughed. "That's not a qualification. That's just sad." Other staff members watched the exchange uncomfortably, but said nothing. Sarah retreated to her office, face burning. Maybe Brad was right. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe she was just a token hire someone to make the Pierce family feel better about themselves. She was staring at her computer fighting tears when someone knocked on her door. Alexander stood there, and for a moment she saw Mr. Gray again, the lost old man who'd helped her fold laundry. "I heard what Brad said," Alexander told her, his voice hard. "I'm sorry. That was unacceptable." "He's not wrong, though. I don't have the credentials everyone else does." "You have something better. You have truth." Alexander sat across from her. "Do you know why I built Pierce Global? I was poor once too. My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses. I grew up in a neighborhood not much different from yours. I know what it's like to choose between food and rent." Sarah looked up surprised. "You never said." "I don't talk about it much. Once you get rich, people forget you were ever anything else. But I remember. And I forgot what it was like to use that memory for good instead of just making more money." He leaned forward. You remind me. You remind me why I started the foundation in the first place. Don't let people like Brad make you doubt yourself." "How do I prove I belong here?" "You already have. That report you wrote was better than anything Brad's produced in years. Olivia knows it. I know it. Eventually, everyone will know it." After Alexander left, Sarah felt steadier. She dove back into her work with renewed determination. The Community Needs Assessment Project became her baby. She didn't just read reports. She went into the neighborhoods, talked to people, listened to what they actually needed, not what bureaucrats thought they needed. And slowly, the other staff started to notice her programs worked, her solutions were practical, and her passion was undeniable. Olivia started inviting her to bigger meetings, asked her opinion on major decisions, relied on her input. They started having lunch together, then dinner, then coffee on weekends when Olivia insisted on meeting Emma and Sophie. Sarah found herself relaxing around Olivia, finding common ground. Olivia was lonely in her wealth, isolated by her position. Sarah was lonely in her poverty, isolated by her struggles. They balanced each other out. One evening, they were working late on a new housing initiative. The office was empty, except for them, the city lights spread out below like fallen stars. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia said suddenly. "Why did you really help my father? And don't say it's what anyone would do, because it's not." Sarah thought about it. "My dad died because he gave his coat to someone who needed it. I was angry at him for years. Thought he was stupid for putting someone else first." She looked at Olivia. "But when I saw your father in that alley, I understood. Some things are more important than being smart. Some things you just have to do because they're right." Olivia's eyes were soft. "He talks about you all the time, you know. Says you and your family saved more than his life. You saved his soul." "That's dramatic." "But true." Olivia hesitated, then reached across the table and touched Sarah's hand. "I'm glad he found you. I'm glad you found us." The touch lingered longer than it should have. Their eyes met and held. Sarah felt something shift between them, something warm and uncertain and full of possibility. She pulled her hand back gently. "We should finish this proposal." "Right, yes, the proposal." Olivia's cheeks were slightly pink. They worked in comfortable silence, but something had changed. An awareness, an understanding that maybe this connection between them was more than just professional, more than just friendship. But neither of them was quite ready to name it yet. 1 year later, the garden at the Pierce estate had been transformed. White flowers everywhere, chairs arranged in perfect rows, a string quartet playing softly. The late spring sun was warm, and the air smelled like roses. Sarah stood in a small room off the main house, looking at herself in the mirror. The dress was simple, elegant, cream-colored, because she'd never wanted traditional white. Emma fussed with the hem, tears already streaming down her face. "Stop crying, Mama. You'll make me start." "My baby," Emma said, her voice thick. "My beautiful baby." Sophie burst in wearing her flower girl dress, a crown of daisies in her hair. "Mama, everyone's here. There's so many people. And the cake is huge, Mr. Gray. Mr. Pierce said I could have 2 pieces. "Just 1 piece," Sarah corrected automatically. "And be good during the ceremony." "I will." Sophie hugged her tight. "You look like a princess." Sarah didn't feel like a princess. She felt terrified and excited and overwhelmed. There was a soft knock on the door. "Sarah, can I come in?" Alexander stepped inside, resplendent in a gray suit. He stopped when he saw her, and his eyes filled with tears. "You look beautiful." "Don't you start too," Sarah warned. He laughed, wiping his eyes. "I wanted to say thank you for everything, for saving my life, for letting us into yours, for making my daughter happier than I've ever seen her." "She makes me happy too," Sarah said softly. "I know. I can see it." Alexander pulled a small box from his pocket. "This was my wife's, Olivia's mother. She died when Olivia was 12, and I've kept this all these years. I'd like you to have it." Inside was a delicate bracelet, silver with tiny diamonds. "Alexander, I can't." "Please, you're family now, officially, and this should stay in the family." He fastened it around her wrist. "She would have liked you. She would have been proud that her daughter found someone so genuine." The music outside changed, the wedding march. "That's your cue," Emma said, dabbing her eyes. Sarah walked down the aisle on shaky legs. The garden was full of people. Staff from the foundation, friends from the old neighborhood, Marlene from the diner dabbing her eyes, Frank grinning broadly, and at the end of the aisle, under an arch of white roses, stood Olivia. She wore a tailored suit also in cream, her dark hair swept back, and her face, when she saw Sarah, lit up like the sun. Sarah reached her side, and Olivia took her hands. "Hi," Olivia whispered. "Hi yourself." The ceremony was beautiful. They'd written their own vows. "Sarah," Olivia said, her voice strong despite the tears on her cheeks, "you taught me that wealth isn't measured in dollars, that family isn't defined by blood, that the bravest thing you can do is open your heart to someone who needs it. You saved my father's life, and in doing so, you saved mine too. I promise to love you, honor you, and fight beside you to make the world a little less cold for people who need warmth." Sarah's turn. She cleared her throat, trying not to cry. "Olivia, you showed me that different worlds can collide and create something beautiful, that taking a chance, even when you're scared, can lead to joy. You've given my daughter opportunities I never dreamed of. You've given my mother peace. And you've given me love I didn't think I deserved. I promise to be your partner, your equal, and your home, no matter what comes." "I now pronounce you married," the officiant said, smiling. "You may kiss." They did to cheers and applause. The reception was magical. Dinner was served, champagne flowed, and Sophie ran around showing everyone her flower crown. When it came time for speeches, Alexander stood up, tapping his glass. "A year ago," he said, his voice carrying across the garden, "I was dying in an alley. I had no idea who I was. No memory, no hope, nothing. And a woman who had every reason to walk past me didn't. Sarah saw a human being who needed help, and she helped. Not for reward, not for recognition. Just because it was right." He looked at Sarah and Olivia standing together. "She didn't just save my life that night. She taught all of us what really matters. Not money, not power, not success, but kindness, compassion, the willingness to give when you have nothing left to give." He raised his glass. "To Sarah and Olivia, may their love remind us all that the most valuable thing we can offer each other is our humanity." "Hear, hear," the guests cheered. Brad, standing near the back, clapped along with everyone else. He'd learned over the past year that Sarah belonged exactly where she was. Her programs had a 93% success rate. She'd helped hundreds of people find stable housing, good jobs, and hope. She'd earned her place through results, and even Brad had to respect that. As the sun set and fairy lights twinkled to life in the trees, Sarah and Olivia had their first dance. Sophie joined them halfway through, giggling as Olivia spun her around. Emma stood with Alexander watching. "You raised a good one," Alexander said. "We both did," Emma replied, looking at Olivia. Later, much later, when the guests had gone and Sophie had fallen asleep with her face still painted with cake frosting, Sarah and Olivia stood in the garden alone. "Happy?" Olivia asked. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out this is a dream." "It's not a dream. It's real. We're real." Olivia pulled Sarah close. "You know what I realized today? When my father went missing, I thought I'd lost everything. But what I'd actually lost was perspective. I had all this money, all this influence, and I was using it to make myself feel better, not to actually help people. You help people. Now I do. Because of you." Olivia kissed her forehead. "You didn't just save my father. You saved me from becoming someone who had everything and understood nothing." Sarah leaned into her wife, and watched the stars come out. A year ago, she'd been a struggling waitress taking out trash in a cold alley, wondering how she'd pay next month's rent. Now she was married to the woman she loved, doing work that mattered with a daughter who'd never have to worry about choosing between food and electricity. "You know what I'm going to do tomorrow?" Sarah said suddenly. "What?" "I'm going to go down to that alley behind Maple Street Diner, and I'm going to set up a warming station there, with food blankets and a phone people can use to call for help, because there are more Mr. Grays out there, more people who just need someone to stop and see them." Olivia smiled. "That's why I love you, always thinking about the next person who needs help." "Someone helped me once," Sarah said simply. "My turn to pass it on." They stood in the garden, wrapped in each other's arms, while above them the stars shone down on two women from different worlds who'd found home in each other. Inside the mansion, Alexander watched through the window, Sophie sleeping against his shoulder. He thought about that cold alley, about the hunger and confusion and fear. And he thought about the warm hand that had reached out to him in the darkness. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, a moment of kindness in a dark alley can change not just one life, but many. Alexander kissed the top of Sophie's head and smiled. His family had grown in the strangest, most beautiful way. And it all started with a burger, a teddy bear, and a woman who chose compassion over convenience. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered to the night, "for everything." Outside, Sarah and Olivia turned toward the house, hands linked, ready to start their life together, ready to build something real, ready to make the world a little warmer, one act of kindness at a time.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.